They believed it would be simple, controlled, polished, and predictable. Another carefully constructed moment in Prince Harry's ongoing media strategy. The BBC producers expected a contained interview, the kind that could be trimmed, softened, and broadcast as another polished chapter in the Duke's public narrative. What they got instead was a slow motion unraveling. From behind the glass of the control room, the staff watched in mounting disbelief as one of Britain's most formidable interviewers began stripping away the cushion of PR talking points Harry had arrived with. The tension built so quietly, so gradually, that by the time the studio lights dimmed, everyone could feel the shift. This was no longer an interview. It was an extraction. And Harry, the prince who had walked away from the palace, would soon be walking out of the Newsnight studio too, escorted off a program that had reached its limit. The room itself didn't look like a battleground, but it carried the charge of one. Soft golden lamps cast a warm glow that touched the gilded edges of two red velvet chairs. They faced one another like opposing thrones. A small round table stood between them with a glass bottle of water and two untouched glasses, almost ceremonial in their stillness. Behind it all loomed a massive oil painting of a darkened London skyline, the shadowed city seeming to lean in and listen. On the left, Emily Maitlis sat perfectly composed, shoulders straight, legs crossed, her notepad rested on her lap with a pen clipped neatly across the top. Her expression was conversational, even gentle, but her jawline betrayed something firmer. This was Newsnight, not a talk show, not a therapy session, not a safe space. Opposite her sat Prince Harry. He shifted in his chair, his tailored suit stretching across his broad shoulders. His ginger beard was neatly trimmed, his hair a touch thinner than the tabloids loved to exaggerate, and his eyes carried the faintest glimmer of irritation, as though he had arrived expecting hostility, and therefore prepared to misinterpret everything. "Good evening," Emily began, her voice measured and steady. "Tonight a rare extended interview with the Duke of Sussex, a man who says he stepped away from the institution that shaped his entire life, yet whose story continues to dominate our headlines." She turned to him. "Prince Harry, thank you for being here." Harry offered a tight, almost reluctant smile. "Well, I'm very generous with my time, Emily, especially when it comes to correcting the record." In the control room, someone scribbled a note. Someone else leaned closer to the monitor. The tone had been set. Emily did not react. "Let's talk about that record," she said. "You've released documentaries, a memoir, multiple interviews. You've said you're finally sharing your truth. Yet each time you speak, new versions of events seem to emerge. Do you understand why some people feel fatigued?" His jaw tightened. "Fatigued?" he repeated, laughing without humor. "People were happy enough to read lies about me for 25 years. A few hours of hearing the truth seems like the least they can tolerate." Emily continued, voice calm. "But does the truth require constant retelling? You've said you wanted privacy. You've spoken about media intrusion. Yet here you are again, speaking publicly about the very system you say traumatized you." Harry leaned back, clasping his hands. "Privacy is about choice," he said firmly. "I choose when and how to speak. That's different from being hunted. That's what happened to me, to my wife, to my mother." Emily nodded. "You bring up your mother often," she said. "You've compared Meghan's experiences to hers. Some critics say you're using your trauma as a shield against criticism. What do you say to that?" His eyes hardened. "I'd say those critics are part of the problem. Of course they don't want me talking about it. It exposes the system they work for. And I," Emily said evenly, "I'm part of the media. So let me ask directly, do you believe I am personally complicit?" Harry gave a small, dismissive smile. "You're part of the machine, Emily. Whether you like it or not." A thick silence followed. Emily inhaled slowly. "You speak often about empathy, kindness, and mental health. Yet your descriptions of journalists are sweeping. Do you understand that?" "I understand," Harry replied sharply, "that I'm done being polite. We tried silence for years. It cost us more than you can imagine. You don't get to lecture me on tone." Emily held his gaze for a beat, then redirected. "Let's get specific. Security. You've taken legal action after your police protection was removed. At the same time, you've criticized Britain and its institutions. Do you see any tension in asking British taxpayers to fund security for someone who stepped away from royal duties?" Harry's smile was thin and cold. "I risked my life for this country in Afghanistan. I flew missions you can't discuss on television. The idea that my family's safety is now a budget debate is insulting." No one questions your military service, Emily said. I'm asking about public perception. You moved to California. You've signed lucrative media deals. Yet you expect special protection when you return. Many veterans would say they don't get that privilege. They're not hunted by international paparazzi. Harry snapped. They're not linked to one of the most famous families in the world. Comparing us is disingenuous, and you know it? Emily's eyes narrowed with focus. Then let's talk about that family. You've accused unnamed relatives of serious failings. You've shared private conversations, personal tensions, intimate moments. Did you ever stop and think I am doing to them, in my book and interviews, what I say the press did to me? Harry snorted. No, because there's a difference between exploitation and accountability. Explain that difference, Emily said quickly, her pen hovering above her notepad as though she was already anticipating a shift in the conversation. Exploitation, Harry answered, leaning forward now, elbows tightening against his knees, when pieces of someone's life are taken without consent, twisted, packaged, and sold. Accountability is telling the truth about people who abused the system they were born into. If my family had behaved differently, there'd be nothing to talk about. His words dropped with a kind of cold finality. Emily's eyes flickered, not with surprise, but with calculation. Your brother? She asked quietly. Your father? Are they abusers in your eyes? Harry's head snapped up. That's an emotionally manipulative question, he said sharply. You're trying to get a headline. I'm trying, Emily replied, still calm, to understand how far your anger extends. You've spoken about physical altercations, shouting matches, and long silences. Some viewers might wonder whether you've become the very thing you claim to be fighting, someone who cannot let go. For the briefest moment, something crossed his face, annoyance, perhaps doubt, but it vanished almost instantly. In its place came a practiced steadiness, a look he had likely used in boardrooms, on sets, in interviews meant to promote rather than challenge. Let me be very clear, he said, voice hardening with each syllable. I didn't start this war, but I'm not going to apologize for refusing to lose it quietly. Emily let the line sit for a few seconds, as though allowing the viewers at home to swallow it whole. Then she scribbled on her notepad. In this interview, she said, you've used the word war twice already, a war with the press, a war with the institution, a war for your narrative. Do you worry that ordinary people dealing with energy bills, the NHS backlog, the cost of living, will see this as theatrical, as a privileged feud between a prince and his palace? Harry exhaled sharply. That's the classic deflection. Whenever someone from a marginalized position speaks up, suddenly we're told there are real problems, as if multiple realities can't exist at the same time. Do you? Emily asked softly. See yourself as marginalized? A tiny pause, barely a heartbeat, then his chin lifted. In some ways, yes, he said. In my own family, certainly. I married someone the institution wasn't ready for. We were punished for it. And yet, she countered, leaning slightly forward, you are still a prince. You live in a multi-million-dollar home in Montecito. You monetize your title whether you admit it or not. Is that marginalization, or is it rebranding? Color crept into Harry's cheeks, faint but unmistakable. This is exactly what I expected, he said coldly. I come here to discuss our projects, mental health work, veteran support, and instead you play semantics with my life. If that makes good television, congratulations. We will discuss your projects. Emily replied evenly. But people can read about those in a press release. What they rarely see is you under scrutiny. So yes, this is television, and it is journalism. Harry's eyes narrowed. You sound proud of that? I am, she replied without hesitation. On the studio monitors, the pair looked like two chess pieces locked mid-game, one relentless in her precision, the other increasingly agitated, the edges of control beginning to fray. Emily scanned her notes again, then looked up. Let's end this section on something simple. If your father were watching tonight, and he switched off halfway through this interview, what line do you most hope he heard? Harry froze. The cameras captured every second of the silence that followed. Finally, he said, that I won't stay quiet just to make him comfortable. Emily nodded once. And what line? She added gently. Do you most fear he hears? A muscle tightened in Harry's jaw. He didn't answer. More from Prince Harry. Emily said smoothly, turning to the camera. After the break, we'll ask whether his new life in California is as free as he claims, And what happens when a man who walked away from the palace discovers that public opinion can walk away from him too? The lights dimmed. The control room exhaled. One producer whispered, "That was just the first block." No one dared look away. When the lights surged back, Harry sat straighter, shoulders squared in a posture that looked almost military. Whatever unease had flickered earlier was gone. He wore defiance now like armor. Emily met his gaze with unbroken calm. "The war," the director murmured, "has entered open combat?" Before the break, Emily resumed, "I asked what you feared your father might hear tonight. You didn't answer, so let's shift." She glanced at her notes. "You've said moving to California gave you freedom, that for the first time, you could live without institutional control. But from the outside, your life seems more commercial, more managed, and more exposed than ever. What does freedom mean to you?" Harry let out an incredulous laugh. "That's a very British framing of freedom, as though it only counts if others approve." "Is it freedom?" Emily countered calmly. "If your life now moves through publicists, lawyers, contracts, and streaming platforms." "Of course it is," he snapped. "Because we chose those relationships. The palace didn't give me a choice. Netflix didn't force me to be born the spare." Emily didn't speak. She simply waited. "You refer often to being the spare," she said finally. "In your book, in interviews, in your advocacy, some psychologists have suggested that this fixation signals unresolved identity conflict. Do you agree?" Harry's eyes flashed, bright, defensive, wounded, and angry all at once. "That's psychoanalysis through a television screen," Harry snapped. "It's irresponsible. I'm quoting experts," Emily replied without flinching. "Experts who say identity trauma doesn't vanish simply because someone changes geography. And I'm telling you," he shot back, voice rising, "that distance saved my life, mentally and possibly physically." "From what?" she asked softly, her tone almost disarming. "From your family, or from the role they represent." "From the machine," he said. "From expectations, silence, hypocrisy." Emily leaned forward slightly, like a surgeon preparing to make a precise incision. "And yet the machine you criticize is also the source of your global platform, your influence, your revenue streams. If you had been born simply Harry Windsor, no title, no royal connection, would Hollywood have offered you those deals?" The question landed exactly where she aimed it. Harry's lips tightened. "So now my birth disqualifies my suffering?" "No," Emily replied calmly, "but it complicates your claim of being trapped without benefit." He shifted in his chair, irritation rippling under the surface. "People love talking about the benefits. They rarely mention the cost." "Then let's list them," she said crisply. "Costs: you lost military duties. You lost Frogmore Cottage. You lost proximity to your family. Gains: financial independence, total narrative control, extraordinary visibility." "Is that unfair?" "It's hollow," Harry said flatly. "You can't put total narrative control and British tabloids in the same discussion." "But you are controlling the narrative now," Emily pressed. "Books, films, high-profile interviews, all curated by you." For the first time, he countered sharply. She nodded once and then pivoted. "Which brings me to Meghan." His posture changed immediately. Shoulders stiffened. The defenses rose like a drawbridge. "You've both said one of the main reasons for leaving the UK was press hostility toward your wife. Racism, intrusion, intimidation. Yet since leaving, you've increased your exposure dramatically. Global media tours, major interviews, branded content. How do you reconcile that?" "We control the environment now," he said. "That's the difference." "And when Meghan sits down with an American host," Emily replied, "answers deeply personal questions, that's control. But when British journalists investigate claims you've made, that's harassment." Harry's voice sharpened. "British journalists didn't investigate. They attacked." "Some would argue," Emily said evenly, "that journalists examined inconsistencies, dates, timelines, wording. Inconsistencies happen when trauma is retold." He interrupted. "Anyone who's lived it knows that." "Then let's discuss one specific inconsistency," Emily said. She lifted a page from her notes. "In one interview, your wife said discussions about your child's skin tone happened before his birth. Later, you clarified the conversation took place earlier in your relationship. Can you explain that difference?" Harry froze. "Just briefly, but the cameras caught everything." "That was deliberately distorted by the press," he said. "I'm quoting your own words," Emily replied. "The nuance was destroyed," he insisted. "For shock value?" You don't think the nuance matters? She asked. This was one of the most explosive racial allegations ever made against the royal family. Harry leaned forward, tone hardening further. The fact that you're still questioning the validity of that experience says more about the institution than about me. I'm questioning the timeline, Emily said quietly. Not the pain. They're inseparable, he snapped. Journalism sometimes requires separating them, she replied, because one shapes public outrage, the other shapes public trust. He shook his head. This is why nothing changes. You hide behind definitions while real people suffer. And definitions, she countered, at what turn claims into evidence. Now the frustration was unmistakable. Harry's foot bounced against the carpet, barely noticeable but telling. Let me ask you something, he said, shifting strategy. Has your family ever been chased through a tunnel by flashing bulbs? Has your mother died because photographers wouldn't stop? Emily's face didn't change. No, but many families have lost loved ones without global titles attached. Grief is not a competition, Prince Harry. His eyes darkened. It becomes a competition when people use it to delegitimize your choices. And it becomes politics, she said softly, when you use it to justify everything you've done since. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. She continued before he could gather momentum. You've accused the royal family of emotional neglect. You've accused the British media of racism. You've accused palace staff of sabotage. Is there any institution in your story that isn't an antagonist? The one I'm building? He said curtly. With Netflix, with charities, with veterans foundations, with youth mental health initiatives. Funded how? She asked. Through the commercial work you keep framing as morally suspect. He shot back. Moral questions arise. Emily said, when advocacy becomes indistinguishable from branding. That's cynical, he said. Or realistic, she replied. The tension in the room thickened, invisible but suffocating. Emily adjusted her posture, preparing the final strike of the segment. One last question, she said. Do you believe anything you've done since leaving Britain has improved relations with your family? Harry exhaled slowly. No, he said at last. But I don't measure my life by their comfort anymore. And if the result? Emily's question lingered in the air, like a blade suspended above the table. If the result, she repeated carefully, as permanent estrangement, no reconciliation, no return, not as a royal, not as a son, is that a cost you are willing to accept? Harry's gaze dropped to the floor. For a moment, everything inside him seemed to fold inward: the anger, the conviction, the exhaustion from years spent defending the same wounds over and over. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but resolute. Then that's the price of truth. Emily regarded him quietly, studying the unflinching calm he wrapped around himself like armor. Some would call that, she said softly, a very high price to pay for a narrative that will always be contested. Harry lifted his head, defiance returning to his eyes. Truth always is. Emily turned slightly toward the camera as the segment drew to a close. When we return, she said smoothly, we'll explore the part of Prince Harry's life that remains almost entirely private, his children, and whether his fight with the monarchy has unintentionally created exactly the kind of exposure he once vowed to escape. The camera lights faded. In the control room, a producer murmured, he's cornered now. It wasn't triumph, it was tension sharpened to a point. Harry adjusted his cuffs in silence as the commercial break rolled. When the lights rose again, brighter and somehow colder, the studio felt smaller. The air between them had thickened into something dense and brittle. Emily sat poised, notes resting on her lap, though she didn't look at them. Instead, she studied him, the way someone studies a locked door, searching for the hinge that might give way. Before the break, she began gently. We spoke about truth, narrative, and consequence. I'd like now to talk about the part of your life you protect most fiercely, your children. Harry stiffened instantly. They are off limits. Emily nodded once. I'm not asking for names, details, or images. I'm asking about choices. Harry said nothing. You've said repeatedly that you left Britain to protect them from intrusion. She continued. Yet your children now live in a country with a far more aggressive celebrity economy. Paparazzi culture in California isn't smaller. It's industrial. How do you reconcile that? Will control access? Harry replied sharply. That's the difference. Do you? Emily asked softly. Because your children's existence is now central to a global brand. Streaming documentaries, books, carefully staged photographs, timed releases. They are hidden and yet omnipresent. They are not products. He snapped no. Emily agreed. But they are part of a story that generates revenue. Harry leaned forward. You're implying exploitation. That's disgraceful. I'm implying contradiction, she said evenly. You accuse the palace of using you as assets, yet you've built a commercial structure where your identity as a royal exile is the primary commodity. My children are not that identity, but they are affected by it. Silence fell, heavy, pressurized. Emily pressed on. You've written that one of your deepest fears is history repeating itself, that your children may one day resent you for the life they inherited. Harry swallowed. Every parent fears that. Then let me ask plainly, will your children grow up knowing Britain as part of their heritage, or only as the villain in your story? They will grow up knowing the truth. Whose truth? Emily asked quietly. Harry hesitated. Their truth, he said, though his voice carried less certainty. Emily leaned back a fraction. Your son is an American citizen. He will be educated outside British culture, outside royal tradition. Is it fair to say he may never understand the institution you oppose so passionately? Good, Harry said. That's the point. But if he never understands it, she countered, how can he judge it independently? He doesn't need to judge it. He needs to be free from it. Freedom from context, Emily said, can also be freedom from comprehension. You're turning philosophy into accusation. No, I'm turning consequence into responsibility. Harry exhaled sharply. You keep framing everything I do as contradictory, but life after trauma is contradictory. And yet you speak in absolutes, she said. Villains and victims. Liberation and captivity. There's rarely a middle ground, because the middle ground failed us. Harry shot back. Silence thrives there? Emily lowered her voice. Or reconciliation survives. The word hung between them like fragile glass. Do you want reconciliation? She asked. Harry's jaw tightened. He looked away. I want accountability. For whom? For everyone who enabled what happened. Even if that accountability costs your children a relationship with their grandparents, their cousins, their homeland. They'll survive without castles, he said coldly. But will they survive without roots? Irritation broke through his restraint completely. You keep romanticizing the institution that nearly destroyed my marriage. And you, Emily replied, keep reducing an entire system of thousands into a single villain because complexity doesn't serve your narrative. That's insulting. It's probing. Behind the cameras, a faint shift rippled through the crew. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a reckoning. You're implying it, Harry said sharply. I'm questioning power, Emily answered, unflinching. Parental power, narrative power, financial power. The very same powers you accuse others of misusing. Harry pointed, not a grand gesture, but rare enough to signal a crack in his composure. You speak as though neutrality exists in grief. It doesn't, nor does immunity, she replied. The air tightened. The tension wasn't just present now. It was electric, humming through every inch of the studio. Harry's breathing had changed, becoming shorter, sharper, betraying the pressure he was under. Let me ask one final question about your children, Emily said. Her voice remained steady, but carried a new firmness, the tone of someone approaching the heart of the matter. When they are old enough to read your book, your version of events, will they also have access to the versions that contradict you? Harry stared at her. They'll see the lies for what they are. And if they don't? Emily asked. The pause that followed was long, deliberate, and cutting. Then I've failed them, he said quietly. The admission stunned the room. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't rehearsed. It slipped out like something he hadn't meant to reveal. Emily seized the moment. Failure, she said, is not leaving the institution. Failure would be denying your children the full complexity of their inheritance, both the good and the bad. Harry shifted, unsettled for the first time. The composure that had shielded him earlier was thinning, like armor dented one hit too many. I will not let the monarchy define my children, he said firmly. No, Emily replied, but you're defining the monarchy for them. He opened his mouth to argue, but she pressed forward before he could regain momentum. Let me move to one last area, your future. Harry narrowed his eyes. My future. You have cut ties with your country in all but sentiment, Emily said. You have commercial commitments, political positioning, and a global audience. Do you intend to remain a campaigning figure, or do you ever plan to withdraw from public conflict? I don't retreat, he said. Even when conflict becomes identity, she asked. I am not defined by conflict. Tonight, she replied, almost everything you've said has been framed against an enemy. His lips tightened. Because the enemy hasn't disappeared. Emily leaned in fully now, abandoning all buffer between them. And what happens when the enemy finally does disappear? When the palace grows quiet, when public interest fades, when outrage no longer sustains a platform. Harry frowned. He did not answer. Who is Prince Harry? She asked softly, when there is no institution left to resist. The question hit deeper than anything before. Harry shifted in his chair, unable to find a comfortable position in the weight of it. After a long silence, he said abruptly, You're trying to dismantle me. I'm asking who you are without the war? She replied. This interview has turned hostile, he said, his voice hardening. No, Emily said, meeting his gaze without flinching. It has turned honest. For the first time that evening, the balance of authority shifted. Harry was no longer steering the narrative. He was reacting to it. And when we return, Emily said calmly, turning toward the camera, we will address the question that now defines this conversation, whether Prince Harry is still fighting the monarchy, or whether he is now fighting the consequences of having left it. The lights dimmed for the final break. Harry sat in rigid silence. In the control room, the producer whispered, He's unraveling. The studio returned from break in dead quiet. No music, no soft transition. Emily did not smile. Prince Harry, she said, you've spoken tonight about truth, accountability, family, trauma, and power. But every question that challenges your narrative, you've treated as a personal attack. Harry folded his arms. Because that's exactly what this has been. No, Emily replied. This has been an interview, one you agreed to. You twist every answer. He shot back. You're trying to trap me in contradictions that only exist in your framing. The contradictions, she said calmly, exist in your words, not mine. Harry shook his head, disbelief turning into anger. This is why I left, this tone, this manipulation dressed up as journalism. Emily leaned forward. Then let me be absolutely clear. Journalism does not exist to protect you from discomfort. It exists to test power. And tonight you have resisted every test.
Because your test is biased.
And your resistance, she replied, has become avoidance. The tension snapped. Harry shoved back in his chair. I will not sit here and be dismantled for your ratings. For the first time, Emily's expression hardened. This program is not a stage for grievance theater. You were invited here for dialogue, not lectures, not accusations, and certainly not contempt. Harry stood abruptly. Then I'm done. Prince Harry, Emily said, her voice steady. If you cannot engage without hostility, this interview cannot continue. He stared at her. Are you asking me to leave? Yes, she said without hesitation. I am. A collective gasp rippled through the studio. Harry looked stunned, then furious. He tore off his microphone, placed it on the table, and said coldly, history will judge this. So will tonight, Emily replied. Harry turned and walked out of frame. The door closed softly, but the impact echoed like thunder. Emily faced the camera, composed and resolute. Truth does not require agreement, she said. It requires courage. The screen faded to black. Did Emily make the right call? Her voice asked over the outro. Or did Harry deserve more space to speak? Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts. The next story is even more intense.